Every human, as they live their life, is almost like an experiment that plays itself out. I've been making art long enough to realize some of the psychological benefits of dedicating myself to making art. And I didn't set out for these benefits. The reason I became interested in making art is very similar to reasons why people become very interested in doing sports or very interested in math. Or if when I was first starting out, if someone who could see the future told me, if you continue to do art, you're going to live a miserable life and you're still going to do your art, I would have done it anyway. I was just interested in doing art. But the fact is that through doing art, it has had some wonderful benefits. So I want to talk about happiness. Most of the time when people are asked what makes people happy, they think of the first third of happiness, which is that your needs are met. You receive, your security needs. You can stay dry when it rains. You receive pleasure. All of your reasonable wants and desires are fulfilled. That's usually what people think of happiness. The other third of happiness that hardly ever gets noticed is the feeling of significance, that is, of learning new discovery, of making a true contribution to life on this mortal existence that we get to play out for a little bit. And the third neglected, little looked at reason for true happiness is our own self-image that we have of ourselves. Now, to overly generalize, I can say that practicing art is sort of like paying attention to the two-thirds of happiness, and often at the sacrifice of the one-third. That is, people who get into art get into it so much that they're willing to become the quote starving artist. They're willing to give up a lot of those wants and what are thought of as earthly desires in order to pursue the other two-thirds of achieving happiness. What happens with our own self-image that we have of ourselves? This is a very subconscious event. So this is something that we can only barely detect and see how it is happening. And it usually takes a lot of paying attention to realize what a profound effect this has on our lives. And usually the way we play it out is that we project that on others. So we think that we're paying attention to how others see us, but really what it's all a part of is how we see ourselves. And the way it works out is that when we're around others, we automatically become attuned to who we are to them, what's happening, what value they place on us, and often we can't help but feel that supposed value is our true worth, who we, are we, how great we are and why and all of that. But what most of us don't recognize is that even when we're alone, even when we think we're totally going unobserved, we are being observed. We're being observed by ourselves, and this is creating a very subconscious image of who we are. We know who we are, and this really has an effect on how happy we are and how good we feel. Usually it feels like how others see us has a much stronger effect on how happy or unhappy we are. But how we feel about ourselves can play a much more important role. So I want to tell you a story about a Buddhist monk. So there's a Buddhist monk that lives in a small village, and he is just in a tent, and he has his rice bowl, and he asks for alms for the rice each day, and is devout to his philosophical pursuits. And there is the most beautiful woman in the village, and she becomes pregnant, and she panics, and she blames the pregnancy on this Buddhist monk and leaves the baby with him and leaves the village. And he's scorned, and everyone in the village looks down on him, but he knows what really happened, and he doesn't protest. He raises the child grows up, and the Buddhist monk just continues with what he is doing. This story depicts detachment. What detachment is where it's a state that many try to achieve, where they realize that the real struggle for happiness is that self-image that we carry in ourselves, and to detach it from all of this supposition about how others see us and who we are in the eyes of others and who we are in society, and look at, the real issue is who we know ourselves to really be. Keeping all of this in mind, what happens when we engage in art? What happens when we get into the habit of doing art often throughout our lives? That situation is where we are creating, and aware of it or not, we are giving ourselves feedback of who we are. We are working on that very subconscious, deep self-image that we have of ourselves, and improving it, and in that way improving our overall confidence and happiness. And this practice is detached from the struggles of the chaotic outer world, because it only relies on our own discipline and patience and willingness to put in a few sessions of art until it becomes more and more habit, more and more easy to do, more and more part of our lives, more and more second nature. This is an excellent answer to the questions raised by Eastern philosophy. How do we become more detached from our suppositions? Also remember, if we don't work towards happiness through finding significance in our lives, or happiness through our innermost self-image, we're going to downgrade our ability to enjoy the simple pleasures of life, to enjoy the happiness of eating popcorn, or feeling the wind in our face. All those different small happinesses just won't have as much of an effect on us. That innermost self-image, it all has to do with, as an example, if we're in a situation where we're struggling, we're fighting with someone, way back in the back of our mind, subconsciously, we're doing the calculations, and we think, well, our close friends and relations still know who we really are, and so that kind of balances it out. And it's always this struggle and this balance, and most of the time we make ourselves very dependent on the dramas in life and what happens in the visible world. But when you set out to make art creation a big part of your life, you are creating an independent improver to that 1/3 of happiness. You give yourself feedback while you're making art. You're constantly giving yourself all this positive feedback, and it's enriching and strengthening that deep core of ourselves, that deep identity of ourselves. And so we become more resilient with what happens with us and those around us, and we can become more patient with what is going on, and we're not so affected by what people say and what happens in the world, because one of the things that inner identity depends on is our art practice, which can can all depend on how much you bring to it. And it is not so much of a gamble, and it is not so chaotic. So if your art practice has become a very strong part of your life, you can bring a much cooler head to situations and be able to make much more rational decisions and be able to see more clearly and not be so clouded by all of these emotional, suppositions and paranoid thinking and all of that. Also, when you go to people without dependency, when you're not in any way needing them to be a certain way for you, it makes life situations go a lot easier. There's a confidence for being assured about what's going to happen, but then there's a confidence about who we know ourselves to be. And when you're continually enriching your innermost identity through practicing art, you bring that strong identity, that sense of who you are, and it does not flip on a coin. It is not easily thrown, because you've put in the time and hours of all this feedback that who you are as a creative individual who is, you're spending your time looking for meaning and creating something new and using artwork for discovery. And if this is a very strong part of your identity, that will make you have much calmer sailing through all kinds of situations. And also remember, if there is someone who is intentionally trying to hurt you, they are at the same time, with every action that they do, unintentionally hurting themselves. They are unintentionally giving themselves feedback about who they truly are on a subconscious level. The whole gamut of all the ways that we bring each other down, it's helpful to keep in mind that they at that same time, more so than how they can affect you, they are downgrading their future happiness. My supposition is that why are some of these famous artists also famous for being total bastards, for being really rude, or really leaving their family, or really just doing terrible things? My idea is that I think that it's very likely that through doing their art and becoming that being such a big part of their lives, they have created such a resilient inner identity that they don't hesitate to also do some terrible things that for us would, for all the rest of us would totally ruin our identity, make us feel terrible about ourselves for the rest of our lives. So I'm not recommending this, I'm just saying that is that's what I think is happening in those cases. So remember, the next time, every time you sit down to do art, just spend a little time appreciating the situation. You are giving yourself all this amazing feedback that is going directly into that innermost identity of yourself and strengthening it and pulling it together. In a lot of teachings about the inner life, the idea is to detach from the world, to not fight back, and to try to center yourself and bear through it and try to do good. And that is what is affecting that innermost identity. And I say that's great to have that understanding about human nature. Let's take it a step further. If you're going through difficult times, if you're in a competitive work environment full of cutthroats and liars and cheats, you can bear down with your personal life and become very involved in your art. And what you are doing, instead of getting caught up in the drama and letting it tear you down, you are taking the vulnerable parts of yourself out of the situation, and all that really matters about your inner workings are all involved in your interest in your art, and you're working on your art and you're dedicating yourself and you're getting all this positive feedback. and it's real because you're creating, the fact that you're working with material makes it all that much more real and all that much more substantial. It's not as wistful as meditation. You're working, when you work with real material, it substantiates it, and it has a much stronger effect on the inner identity. And what happens when you've gotten past that rough spot, when you look back, the first thing that pops into mind is, well, during that time, look at who I was. I was someone who really just paid attention to making his art, and you're able to let go of it, because instead of holding on to what other people did and said, you can realize that just describes who they were being. That's all about them. It isn't about you, and you're able to get past it and move on. All I can say is that if you have your art creation in your life, there are a lot of things that just don't matter. You just don't have it in you to hold a grudge or be resentful of people or be envious of people, because you have something. You have something real that you know is of great value and brings you lots of happiness, and you feel lucky to have that in your life. So all of that drama issues, just they don't happen because you're not missing anything that you need to do drama to get. Human beings always compare and rate themselves and compare and rate everyone else, and these are usually for looks or intelligent or affluence, what you have or don't have, all of these different things. And now, dedicating yourself, having art flourishing in your life are one of these things that can make for a worthy human being. Now, I know on a conscious level, I know I would instantly think, well, we're all worth, something. It's really too bad that we have to compare and all this. But I'm talking about on a subconscious level, our happiness depends on if we feel like we're a worthy human being or not, and that all depends on what we choose to focus on for generating that feeling of worthiness. Now you can choose to focus on it for how you are socially. If you're really great at bringing people together, you name it. You come up with a reason. I'm just saying that the art option is an excellent option for developing for you deciding that you're a worthy human being. So thank you for watching my videos. If you would like to go check out the art project I'm working on, it's a illustrated story, narrated story in webisodes, video form at solomation.com, and if you take the time to go check that out, I'd greatly appreciate it. And if you like my videos, please hit the like button and subscribe, tell friends about it, and if you have any feedback, anything that did it get you thinking about anything, do you have comments that you think other viewers would enjoy reading, please leave a comment. I hope your artwork goes great, and have a good day. Let's just say that there is someone whose self-worth is very dependent on their red sports car, their amazing $3 billion red sports car, and it gives them a self-worth that they take into every situation. It makes their whole life go smoothly. They're happier, they feel great about themselves, they enjoy their life. But there's a vulnerability there, because if a lightning storm strikes and blows up that sports car, there goes their self-worth. And now if your self-worth is greatly wrapped around your artistic practice, and if another lightning bolt blows up your computer and your paintings in the corner and all that, you do take a hit, but that's only, it didn't get at the heart of it, because the very next day you're in the habit of continuing to make art, and that's indestructible, and that can create just as strong a feeling of self-worth that can make your life go smoothly. Even if a lightning bolt does not blow up the red sports car, it brings along with it this uneasiness because it's dependent on something physical. So, along with that self-worth, you also have a worry. You have to worry about the condition, about the dust, about it getting scratched.